All right, well, welcome in everybody. Hopefully you know where you are right now, but just in case, this is the University of Washington Master of Human-Computer Interaction and Design program, info session for admissions. And we're here to talk to you about the program, to hopefully share some information about how things fit together and how we see the sort of the structure and the philosophy of the program coming together, and to give you some insight into what we're looking for if you decide to apply to this program. We're trying tonight not to just replicate what's on our website. So I would encourage you to spend some time on our website if you haven't already. We thought it'd be more useful to spend our time chatting about things beyond that and that go a little bit deeper than what you can find on the website. So that's what we have in mind today. And joining me in this, first and foremost, is Axel Rossler. He's our program director. And Axel will be talking very soon about all manner of the things in this program. I'm Matt Bartels. Many of you have emailed with me. I'm the assistant director of student services and answer your questions when you write to MHCID@uw.edu. Also joining us are students and alumni. We'll be hearing from them later in the presentation. We've got Dominic, Stefan, and Madison from the current cohort, and Joan from last year's cohort. And you'll be able to hear from them. I imagine they'll also be in the chat room pretty regularly with you. So it's great to have them along, because you don't want to just get a perspective from Axel and I from the top down. I think it's really helpful to be able to see what the experience is like from the position you'd be in. So our plan of attack for today is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about the program structure and our underlying philosophy of why we put things together the way that we have. Spend a little bit of time breaking down the curriculum and talking about the way that's set up. I'll talk a little bit about career development and what to expect on the career front. And then we'll go into student experience with our guest hosts here. A little bit about the application process, though most of that is covered pretty well on the website. We'll still cover bits of it. And then we'll have question and answer time where we can take your questions and see more specifically what you're looking to get answers for. That's the overall plan for tonight. And let's go ahead and dive in. So to begin things, I think, Axel, if you could talk a little about the program.
Sure thing. So the MHCID program is really a one-of-a-kind program you won't find in any other university. We put this program together some 10 years ago, and I was actually part of the founding faculty of this whole project. And the idea was University of Washington, is one of the leading HCI research universities in the world. So if you go to key conferences such as CHI and this, you find UW papers really ranking at, number 1 or number 2. So we thought at the time, we had an influx of new faculty really focusing on HCI and design. And we thought, what would it be like to build a coalition across campus where we could bring all the different departments together that are focusing on innovation, computer science, human-computer interaction, and design. So grassroots initiative, young and forward-thinking faculty in each department came together. First, we started this group on campus called DUB, Design, Use, Build. And it's really, everybody's involved in type of HCI design research. It's a platform for our students to give practice talks of their papers. And it's also a wonderful platform if you have important guests coming in from across the world and they're visiting campus to give talks on Wednesday. So from this talk series on Wednesday, we started to think about, is there a way we could sort of manifest or cement this idea of interdisciplinary HCI and design research and building a unique degree? So we came up with this idea, what if we offered a one-year master's degree that is co-taught by faculty of all these 4 important, influential departments. And we create sort of this like meeting ground, right? The intersection, hence the circle in the center, right? MHCI really becoming a platform where we would co-teach courses that lie a little bit outside the safety zones of our home departments, right? Because traditionally on universities, fields come with philosophies and cultures, and they all speak different languages and have different values. So what if we create a program where we bring graduate students in that, previously have studied in all kinds of leading programs in the world, in all kinds of leading, HCI design related fields, major subjects, etc. with industry experience, some of them, others, directly coming from undergraduate. And we really create this sort of studio cohort-based program that runs for a year and gives everyone exposure to everybody else's mindset, right? So the idea really is to, if you come in with sort of a research-oriented background, you'll be studying with folks that have backgrounds in design or technology. And, working on design projects, you all have to sort of encounter and explore each other's unique expertise and their sort of value set within their discipline, their language, their assessments of risk, their relationship with innovation, their relationship with, working with people and, doing fields observation type studies or doing more structured experimental type studies, and so how do you bring it all together? Well, you take a group of students and you expose them to project-based studio-centric learning, right? And you run them through project by project. And the other interesting idea was, what if we don't have just one instructor in the class, but what if we have a duo of instructors, each one representing a separate field, right? And the instructors actually getting into it while they teach, kind of live, oh, you said this, I think this is like, kind of thing. And that allows us as instructors, as professors and teachers and you name what, to learn from each other and actually like having this kind of conversation live in front of students. And I think it's also a wonderful platform for our students to constantly challenge us with their experience from their respective programs. So what happened in UCLA, somebody who studied sort of new media design, or how does somebody from Stanford bring in a business background? Or what if somebody comes in from the University of Michigan with an iSchool background, undergraduate? How do they all fit into this landscape here at the University of Washington? So consider yourself a laboratory and consider yourself an experimental team that is learning something, but actually being also part of a larger experiment of this unique interdisciplinary program. That is our philosophy. This thing is very much alive, and we're learning every day. Philosophy, Joe, you want me to say? Oh, we have these slides. We have a number of slides, right? So, thoughtful technology experiences through the application of human-centered design and design thinking. So design thinking, everybody is talking design thinking right now, and everybody's a designer. But, what is design actually, and how do you infuse it in sort of a technology-oriented innovation cycle where everybody realizes it's not really about the technology, but it's about the people, and it's about the social systems we affect through innovation and technology, and how design really becomes a form of research and a form of exploration through production. Number two, we have an interdisciplinary and collaborative mindset, both in teaching and in learning, right? And I alluded to that earlier, like this is really something that is changing every year. And when you really think about the heart of knowledge production, the hottest place is to actually be in a program and see what's happening in teaching and then also in project work, right? And, all of us in our respective fields, maybe computer science, human-centered design, engineering, or the information school, is subjected to the rapid pace of change in our fields, right? And how that affects the values that we have in our respective discipline. So actually creating a teaching and learning setting makes this a unique playground. All right, Matt, I'm just on board for it. I just came out of a 2-hour, 50-minute class. So I'm like, wow, all this is still in my head. Okay, so we learn, make, critique, reflect, and refine iteratively. So this idea of doing and reflecting on it, right? And making as a platform of production, right? So this is not just talking, this is not just writing, this is not just about reading about advances, but this is about creating as a means to, put new ideas into action and, produce prototypes, produce products, produce experiences that you then can share with others. And you can communicate them and, you get something back from whoever you show this. And, that's where the feedback cycle really kicks in. And then you improve your ideas until they really reach critical mass and you can make a difference. The other idea we have here is that we create a unique program that interfaces with industry, right? So traditionally, you have a lot of interactions with industry in the academic scenery, but it's kind of difficult, this difference between professionally oriented and academically rooted. And I think this is where the MHCID program really takes a unique position because, it is a program that is a program that we set up through professional extension. So the idea is really to bring in folks that have background training in the discipline that they're practicing, but they also have professional experience. And also many of our students want to engage back and want to move back into the professional community. On the other hand, we have some of our students that explore a little bit more, that maybe they want to go into teaching, or maybe they want to, share back. So I discovered that they really want to be work for nonprofits and, change the world from that angle. So it's really this interesting point where our focus is not the production of research, as you would find in traditional departments. You would find a 2-year master's or a 4 years PhD, but it's really this idea of like practicing your skill set in a team setting that is interdisciplinary. And we bring a lot of coaching from industry. And so this idea of like, really, okay, what's the pulse out there? What's the pulse in the profession? And, we're also critical towards their profession, right? So we are not just a training shop or not just a boot camp, but we're actually working hand in hand and close to industry to eventually be able to criticize and, innovate industry through the students that we graduate, right? So we think really about our program as, as my colleague, Linda Wagner, who was the first director of the MHCID program, says, we're not shipping products, we're shipping people, right? And the focus really is on building people, on training, on educating, but also learning from them, and create people that can ask the critical question at the critical moment in that meeting, that nobody wants to attend. And then once that question is asked, the whole operation moves forward. So this brings me to this fact of the why and what, right? So it's not just learning how to do it, but it's constantly asking yourself the question, why am I doing this, right? Why am I going deeper into this? Why am I in a graduate degree, right? What's the difference between a graduate degree and my previous experience, right? And that oftentimes is the critical stance towards the work you do, and the reflective manner in which you constantly evaluate what you do and kind of ask yourself the more and more complicated questions. So I think to summarize the education experience, I think a good goal for a graduate degree is not to find all the answers, right, that you set out to find, but actually you graduate and you find you have actually more questions than you have before. Then this program works, right? Because now you're not afraid anymore of like picking up those stones and turn them over and see what lurks behind, and asking all the important questions that need to be asked.
Awesome. So, well, we give Axel a little bit of a break here from having to talk through all that. I just want to reiterate that I think it's important when you're heading into graduate school to think about that philosophy that the program is using to structure the way that they put together their learning. You can take classes anywhere, but like trying to get at what each program has in mind when they're structuring the degree or the boot camp or whatever they're putting together is really important as a graduate student. So I'd keep that in mind as you're looking at different programs, sort of what's beneath all of that. That said, now we're going to talk a little more concretely about what goes on in the program from a more structural level. So this is probably well known to most all of you, but just to kind of set the stage before we get into curriculum particulars, as Axel has said, we operate on a cohort model. What that means for you is that each year we bring together a group of students who start at the same time and graduate at the same time. You're in it together with a small group of students, and you're doing project-based learning with that group of students for most of your coursework. That cohort can really work as a sort of an incubator to hopefully stimulate you, to push you to go further than you might otherwise do. This isn't a program where you just take your homework home and do all your homework on your own and turn it into the professor and have kind of that one-to-one experience. This is project-based learning where your cohort is as important, arguably, as the coursework that you're doing. So we lean firmly into cohort-based learning. Our program size, 30 to 40 students each year. So each year we take just a small number of students in for this curriculum. The current cohort, we have 3 folks from that here today, 36 students in it. That's exactly the kind of size that we're looking for. We have our own studio that we teach the courses in, and it becomes kind of the home for the program. Most of your courses, like I said, are going to be taken with this group of 30 to 40 classmates. About 85% of the courses you'll take as a graduate student here are going to be with the cohort, the entire cohort. So most of your time is spent in that small group. And the way that breaks down, leads into our next subject, which is to talk a little about the curriculum. And we're going to start with kind of an overview and then talk about each of the main pieces of the curriculum rather than going quarter by quarter necessarily through your experience. So when it comes to the curriculum, this is kind of an overview of what the year looks like quarter by quarter in your required classes. But Axel, I think if you want to break down kind of what's going on in each of these pieces, we could talk about the blue, that's the studio courses, the green that are our seminar courses, the gray that's dubbed seminar, and then the orange, which is your capstone process. And we'll show this slide again at the end.
Sounds great. Thanks, Matt. So the core of our program really are the studio sequence. So the studio sequence is basically the opportunity for you to focus the main thrust of your work on in-studio course-based learning. There's a lot of teamwork, but that is really at the heart of our mission as a program, is to really put you in a setting where you learn from each other, and also put you in a setting that's very similar to what you will find in industry, right? Where you work in a team on a project. And so we have technically we have 5 studios. The first one being a very short sort of immersion studio that lasts for a week. That is actually something we do before the launch of fall quarter. An immersion studio is really an opportunity for you to get to know each other, get to know the program, get to know the faculty that's involved. So what we did in immersion studio this quarter was really about generating ideas on the topic of accessible cities. Like, how do we make cities more accessible through mobile devices, environmental computing, sensing, databases, maps that we can find. So in the course of 5 days, short thing, right? We would form groups. We have the groups brainstorm. We have the groups further develop some ideas. We have them make a selection of their ideas and present them back to the class and to the broader UW community. So in these 5 days, everybody who's involved with the program will come in for short critique sessions, for some feedback, for lecture elements. So that's kind of a dry run of like, okay, this is how we're going to do this. This is project-based learning. This is the studio. Then in fall quarter, your first quarter will be, fall quarter will be an ideation studio. So the focus in ideation studio is on systematic methods on how to develop great ideas, right? Sounds a little bit like snakes or salesmanship, but there is a method behind it, right? So on one hand, you are being exposed to a challenge. Past challenge when I co-taught the class was on how can we use new technologies to engage behavioral change, right? So people that want to change their lifestyle, they want to eat healthy, they want to quit a habit like smoking, or they want to, they're workaholics, or, they get excited about things, or they have anxieties. Like, how do you actually address living with, a condition that you want to positively affect? And then it's really about, okay, let's research this topic. Let's find out what makes, a behavior that you want to change. Find groups that you want to talk with, interview, maybe do a small observational studies in their context, etc. And then really extracting insights from observation. So, what do we see, what do we learn, what are some patterns here? And then you use basically these sort of insights to generate ideas. And this is when your 101 of whiteboarding techniques kicks in, right? 40+ methods on how to use Post-its on whiteboards. And if you ask me, it's like, okay, you use them, right? You improvise while you do it, right? You don't go by the book. You kind of like change the method based on what fits best, right? But if you get stuck, it's really good to know the different methods, right? And say, okay, we're gonna mix this thing up. We do a little bit different thing. And then from that selection of ideas, then it's the idea, okay, now instead of like 100 ideas to be generated, we narrow down on a set of 5. Then, we figure out, okay, what can we take the best of the 5 ideas, integrate it into a single idea. And then in the end, it's the presentation of a concept. That's how our ideation course ends. Now, in winter quarter, the studio topic is prototyping. So here the idea is, okay, you take an idea and now you test it by building it in ways that, you can build yourself, think about rapid prototyping, think about Arduino breadboarding, think about, working with simple sensors, and try it out and get some feedback, right? So it's not just an ask and a show and a tell, it's really like, here's a tryout. Like, how do you engage with that? And what do we learn from actually seeing people engage with our ideas now manifested as prototypes? And the way we do it in the studio sequence is we give you slightly different topics each quarter, because we want you to try a variety of things And we also want you to generate like a set of portfolio items. So it's not just one big project you work on during this year. I mean, you would think, well, maybe the prototyping builds up where the ideation left, but we intentionally throw you into a new problem context, right? So you really practice reacting to a new problem. So that's prototyping studio in winter. And then in spring quarter, we are working on our capstone projects already, because there's a little capstone planning class in winter quarter where you think about your capstone. So capstone now is really this 2-quarter studio sequence where you pick a deeper project, like it's something bigger that now you explore over 2 quarters. And you're also exploring this with an industry advisor. So you pick an industry partner that, besides your studio instructors, gives you advice from a professional standpoint, right? So you have the academic feedback, you have the industry feedback. And this is a project you formulate yourself. We help you find a team of like-minded individuals, or individuals that just enrich the whole thing a little bit, where you can develop an idea for a 2-quarter project in accordance with the industry partners you picked. So you formulate that project. We don't give you that project, you formulate it. And then spring quarter is dedicated to do a research phase on that project, and then summer quarter is dedicated to implement your findings from the research phase. And then what's also different with the summer quarter research studio, it's basically double the time amount allotted than what you had doing the typical studios, right? So this is an 8 credit hours intensive summer capstone studio. And what we usually do from there in that studio is we shift the focus from talking to doing, right? So instead of just giving us shiny presentations and talk about your ideas, show us your ideas. Iteratively develop your ideas, improve your ideas, test your ideas, And then the second half of summer quarter is really focused on effective communication of an idea, right? Because if you can't communicate it, it doesn't exist, right? So you need to be able to do like the 1 minute, to do a 3-minute video, to do a more extensive, perhaps 10-minute deck, to have a presentation with the industry partner that lasts for an hour, right? Where over the course of 20 minutes, you really present the full depth. So that is our studio track, right? Studio track is focused on project-based doing, creating, testing, evaluating, communicating. And then there are the lectures. And what the lectures do, this is our model of theory and practice. This is probably the most difficult thing in design education. It's like, okay, everybody focuses on the making, but what informs the making, right? So there should be knowledge, and you create knowledge. You are gathering knowledge, you're building your knowledge in designing, right? So for our first quarter, where the ideation studio takes place in sort of that making production space, our accompanying lecture is an introduction to research methods, right? Because this is a graduate degree. So you need to understand how to conduct research, what research is, what are some of the critical elements of research, where research becomes controversial, right? How to conduct good research, and some of the basic methods in research, okay, here's field observation, here's an experimental study, how do you deal with data? How do you analyze data? How do you record findings? And then also the ethics of research, right? How do you protect your participants in a research study? How do you identify, sensitive topics from, more common topics that are easier to research, and how that guides your practice as a researcher in design. And in winter quarter, accompanying our studio on prototyping is a lecture on advances in interactive technologies, right? So in that lecture, we survey the state of the art in all the technology platforms we have at our disposal to craft interactive experiences, right? So as you know, this is no longer just visual interface, right? But we have multiple modalities. We have voice interfaces, conversational experiences. We have intensive sensing. We have, database platforms. We have, algorithms, parsing data and coming up with, interactive behaviors of your platforms. We have artificial intelligence as material, and we are just at the beginning of a big revolution that will dematerialize things and will combine computing with physical artifacts. And we are at the verge of a 4th industrial revolution, where software systems and infrastructures heavily impact the way how we deal with physical production. So how will all that transform our field, and how do we get ready to think ahead? Because what you think you're learning right now is already yesterday, right? This label UX UI is something that, everybody is well versed at right at the moment, but what do you do as an interface designer when there are no more interfaces, right? Who's designing the experience for whom? Like, is this really a user experience, or is this an experience for everyone? And, what is your role as a designer in this? What are the power structures behind designing? So these are all the elements we need to discuss. And this brings us to the seminar in spring quarter, where we really look at the theory foundations of design, right? A relatively young history of 100 years. So where's that idea of design thinking coming from? It's actually quite of the newest fad in the design discourse, right? And in some ways, it's a trivialization of deeper backgrounds behind design. So, we're going to read through the key lecture in design theory. We're going to move up to the present day. We're going to touch on subjects such as speculative design and critical design. And that also connects us with the DAP seminar, the slide you see right now, because we happen to be at a major university here that plays a key role in the development of the field, right? So this is where we come back to the DAP group, as I mentioned in the beginning, where we have these weekly talks of, leading researchers that come to campus and, share what they're doing. This is also the platform with students, practice conference talks. So you're going to attend these DAP seminars every week, and you're going to discuss what you've heard. And this is a more research focus, right? And your MHCID program track is more professionally oriented, but we find it's important for you, like the connection between theory and practice in terms of making, to also connect you between sort of professional careers in design and research-oriented careers in design. And this is what we're doing on campus, right? In all these departments, we're focusing on the research element. And the DAP seminars are the perfect convergence point for that. Capstone, as I mentioned earlier, is a 2-quarter endeavor, and the idea is really to create a deep project that becomes sort of the key piece in your portfolio. And this shows that you can take on a complex project and that you can work from research through ideation, through prototyping, to the actual realization of a high fidelity design concept. And you're also able to communicate that. So what you see here is a snapshot of our last year's mirror board of our capstone projects. You see posters here that summarize the project. You see links to video prototypes. So, we really go in depth through like, okay, having an idea and making it is one thing, but actually effectively communicating it and preserving it and documenting it is yet another trait, right? So how do you actually show success and track record? Sort of a track record that you have done these things and that you are versed in this, right? And this is also where we link you to portfolio. How do you feature all this work? So Capstone is really this 2-quarter opportunity to work with an industry partner and your Capstone advisors from the class, from the studio, which again is a team of actually a team of 4 instructors, right? 2 instructors for the spring class on design research, and then for the summer quarter, another set of 2 instructors for the Capstone project. And that ends with a presentation with the industry partners and a showcase at the end of the quarter when we graduate. So that pretty much has run us through the entire project. Capstone planning I haven't talked about so much. Winter quarter is the moment when you form teams and you make a connection with your industry partner. And this is something that we line up for you. So we have a group of industry partners that want to work with our students. So you don't have to do the door work and knock on all these doors. These are quite a nice community of folks that want to work with us. So it's really sort of this matchmaking process of like what students kind of gel together as a team, and then what teams are best for which industry advisor.
Thanks, Axel. That was a lot to go over. And there's only one little bit of curriculum to add on top of that I could talk to for a little bit here is just the electives. So the last piece of what you're doing in your year here, as far as coursework goes, are electives. And you don't need too many electives in this program. Like I said, 85% of your coursework is in that core curriculum. So that's really where the focus should be when you're thinking about what you're going to get out of a program like this. Nevertheless, every student takes 2, maybe 3 electives along the way during the year. These are usually an opportunity for you as a student to identify something that you want to go a little deeper in, a new skill that you're kind of lacking in that you want to build up during this year, or a skill set that you bring in that you want to dive even further into and really kind of strengthen your specialty as you define what kind of a researcher or what kind of a designer you are. Most of the electives that students take in this program are from our sponsoring departments. So again, that DUB community provides access to a lot of courses outside of just MHCI plus D. And you'll take those along the way. But again, think of that as kind of icing on the cake, where the cake is really the main core curriculum that we do. So that's kind of a curriculum overview for us. All of this from here on out is to talk about some things beyond the curriculum, I think. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about career development with this program. And when we get into this, I think we could spend a lot of time sort of bragging about career outcomes and the like, and we put things up on the website about career outcomes from this program. Instead, I'm going to mostly talk about sort of what you can expect when it comes to career development throughout the year here. We're happy to answer outcome questions as well, but this is a professional degree, right? You're here for a year, then you're going out into industry. So preparing for finding your place and finding what you want to do in this field is an important part of your year here. That said, as we think about career development in this program, we really honestly believe that the way to prepare best for a future career is to lead with academics. What you're learning in your coursework here, that's really going to be the foundation that prepares you best. This isn't like some other programs where maybe you're slacking on the academic side and just focusing on what you're going to do on the other end and how to prepare for interviews and the like. We think you're going to be better and find a job more easily and a more rewarding job for yourself if you spend more of your time getting as much as you can out of the courses that you're taking and the experience in the studio as you learn these skills. Because of that, we start light with career development, and then as the year goes along, we add in more and more elements to our preparation. A couple of things that you can expect throughout the year. There's a series of brown bag lunches that are tool-based lunches on the nuts and bolts of how to prepare for interviewing and getting a job in the field. I'll take you through workshops on things like your resume, how to introduce yourself in networking scenarios. We'll talk a lot about each piece of the interview process in a series on phone screen interviews, behavioral interviews, whiteboarding challenges, which are kind of a unique beast in and of themselves, and portfolio presentations. We'll talk about all of those in workshops, and more important than talking, we'll spend time practicing with each other, because a lot of these skills for the job search are skills that are not that difficult to understand once you're doing them, once you're practicing and getting in there. So there's a series of workshops, especially in winter and spring and summer quarters, that really give you all those tools you'll need to navigate through the job search, all the way up to salary negotiations, which is kind of a fun one to be able to think about along the way. In addition to brown bag sessions, these career interviewing brown bag sessions, there are other things that go on throughout the year. We have a portfolio class as an elective in spring quarter, where we bring in a design professional, usually a creative lead in one of the local design agencies here, someone who spends much of their day reviewing portfolios. And they come in and they give us a 1-credit course that gives you a chance to really get into crafting your portfolio for the job search. What is kind of unique about the class, I think in a lot of ways, is the emphasis it puts on storytelling. This isn't a class about how to get your WordPress site into great shape. That will come, but much more important is understanding narrative and understanding how to craft a story that will explain what your contributions were in the work that you've done, in your projects and in your work before that. So we have a portfolio class in spring. We also have a career conference that comes around in summer quarter. That's a chance for you to practice your skills and presenting yourself in front of industry professionals. It keeps growing every year. Last year, we had more than 2 industry folks for every student in the cohort present at the event. It's a chance for you to sit in front of a few people who are working in industry and give a portfolio presentation and receive immediate feedback. You can do that with your classmates, with alumni, with me, but it's awfully nice to get it from hiring managers as well as another source of insight to what you're preparing and how well you're doing in that. Another really important element, I think, for our career development process here goes to our alumni. The alumni from this program, because of this cohort-based style, the alumni are really giving and a great source for helping you prepare as you find your career and figure out which direction you want to go. We run a series of alumni panels throughout the year where we bring alum back to talk about their experience, either in a certain industry or a company, or in his experience working on different questions that they're facing. That happens, but in addition to that, there's a lot of informal contact between current students and alumni, where you can reach out and the alumni are willing to just work with you on answer questions as you go along. We formalize that a little bit beginning in your second quarter with an alumni mentoring program where each student picks 2 alumni to be mentored by. And the purpose there is to have someone who you know that you can go back to for regular interactions throughout the year, so that you don't have to kind of plan all your important questions the first time. These alumni mentors can really see you through the last 3 quarters of the program and often beyond, and give you the perspective of someone who's a handful of years ahead of you in professional development, and can kind of help you figure out what to expect and how to craft yourself as you prepare to go into that job search and beyond. I think the alumni are a really essential piece of how we handle career development here, because they really are amazing every year and how much they're willing to show up for the current cohort. Last thing to know about our resources that we provide within the program are just one-on-one meetings. We run workshops, there are panels, there's all these things going on, but everybody is at a different stage at different times. So a lot of what we end up doing are one-on-one advising meetings with you to help you through whatever stage you're at. And those one-on-one advising meetings are available as a student, but also as an alum. I meet with alumni regularly to help them prepare for their next stage in the job, in their career, help them think about next steps. So once you are in MHCI plus D, you really continue to be a member of the community from there on out. Briefly, there are resources beyond our program itself that are worth thinking of when you're talking about career development. There are advantages to being at a large university like University of Washington. We are a small program, but we can really leverage all sorts of resources at a big university. First and foremost amongst those is the DUB community that Axel mentioned at the very beginning. This design, use, build community. It's awesome to have professionals or academics who are here at the university studying the cutting edge and beyond of the HCI field. That's an incredible resource to be able to rely on as you start thinking about what makes you curious in the field and what are you wanting to pursue later. In addition, the university has other centers that can be useful, like a big university career center that has workshops pretty much every day of the week. If there's some topic that you want to go towards. They bring in industry folks and the like. These are advantages that the University of Washington offers beyond just what's here in our own program. Finally, the broader Seattle community is really an important asset when it comes to thinking about your career development. It is a big bonus that our program is set in Seattle. Seattle is one of the 2 best places available for studying this field, for HCI in general, and especially user design, UX design, user research. We have practitioners walking amongst us here in Seattle. The tech industry here is second only to the San Francisco Bay Area in having people available out in the community who you can talk to, who speak the language, who have been through these same ideas that you're learning during this program, and who you can really much more easily, especially now as we're crossing our fingers emerging from COVID, you can go out and meet with. And having people in town whether they're at big tech companies like, Microsoft and Amazon. Google has a large presence here. Apple has a smaller but growing presence. Facebook has a large campus. So the big tech is all here, but all of the other companies sort of around the periphery of that speak UX and speak user research and understand these topics. There are meetups, there are company visits, things like that happening in the broader community, that being in Seattle really gives you a clear advantage for figuring out where you might be interested in going later. That's kind of the big picture for career development. When it comes to career outcomes, I'd encourage you to take a look at our website. This is a great field to be studying in right now and to be looking for work in, and we've seen a lot of success. Our students are in pretty high demand coming out the other side. So typically by 6 months after graduation, more than 95% of the alum are fully employed within the field. By 3 months out, it's over 70% already. So finding work, that's not a problem. Defining yourself, understanding what you're passionate about, where you want to pursue what kind of work, and that question of why you want to pursue that kind of work, that's where your work happens in career development throughout this year. All right, well, Axel and I have talked quite a bit. I think the next thing that would be pretty interesting is to not hear from us so much, but to talk to some people who are going through or have been through this program. And so now's when we want to spend a little time with our students and alum and hear from them about how they've experienced what we've kind of presented at the broad level. So again, with us today, we have 3 current students: Dominic Giardini, Stefan Odom, Madison Stemler, and then 1 alum from last year's cohort, Joan Williams. What I'd like to do to start us off is just ask each of you to kind of introduce yourself. I think it's really instructive if you can give us a little bit of an intro of where you came from before this program, just to show that, there's no one path here. I think we're all from pretty different backgrounds. So where did you come from and why did you want to come here? What drew you to MHCID program? I'd be curious to hear different perspectives on that. So just because of the alphabetical organization of the slides, Dominic, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, why not? Hi, everyone. I'm Dominic Giardini. So I actually came from the Northwest. I grew up in Massachusetts, south of Boston. I went to school in Maine. I've got the original Maine flag behind me as well. Big fan. So yeah, I was a government and religious studies double major. So if you guys have any kind of like hesitations about heading into this program without having some sort of like technical background, then I am probably the poster child for that not having to be the case. So I guess I like had like this general interest in like being some sort of creator, whether it was a journalist or I don't know, some sort of writer of any kind. And I found out about UX as kind of this great little intersection of like being creative and being like a researcher and like a critical thinker and all these things. It's just this great amalgamation of different kind of skills that I felt kind of pandered to what I was interested in. So I had so my story, I guess, is I had a friend my senior year who I collaborated on a mobile app of I guess like arcade game with, and I was like doing all these design kind of UX principles without really realizing it. And he was already in tech, and he was like, "Why don't you like try to figure out how to find a job in this space?" And kind of searching around, found the different resources that pointed towards MHCID as being like a great program for this. I originally was kind of underestimating my own abilities to get into such a program, but I had a friend who ended up at Carnegie Mellon who was basically imploring me to shoot high in this kind of instance, and basically encouraged me to apply to a range of different places. And I was fortunate enough to get into this program. So I guess if that's another piece of advice I would give, it would be to, don't underestimate yourself, especially if you're coming from a field that's not a tech field, because I basically had this anticipation that because I wasn't coming from the correct space, quote unquote correct space, that I wouldn't be desired as a contributor, but turns out not to be the case.
Awesome. Thank you much. Stefan, how about you?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm from New York originally, so another East Coaster here. And during undergrad, I studied economics, accounting, and computer science. And from that, directly went into business. So I was working as a management consultant at Deloitte. And it was through those experiences that I had the ability to interact with designers at the firm through the group of Dublin, and was exposed to the broader world of UX and UI, and decided from that point that that was going to be the direction that I was going to go into. So when I was speaking with those coworkers, they made mention, hey, graduate school might make sense for you. It's time to pivot, reskill, and come at it from a different direction. So with that information, I set out to understand this space. At first, I just searched graduate degrees in UX, UI, right? But that didn't really exist. And what existed in place of that was HCI, right? Because this is the field that actually underpins the work that is done in those spaces. But once I understood that, I was like, okay, great. What are the top programs in the nation for this space? Begun to collaborate, or rather gather research around those schools, and then end up applying to CMU, to Georgia Tech, and to UW. Ultimately was able to get into all three schools and decided that UW for me was going to be the best fit. So that is my path to how I ended up getting here, and definitely happy to be a part of the broader UW community now.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those of you who are following us on social media channels, you'll see a lot of Stefan. He's our social media manager going forward. So you'll see Stefan or watch his voice evolve on those channels as we get through this fall season and beyond. Next up, Madison.
Hi guys, I'm Madison. I also come from a non-tech related background. So I studied journalism at the University of Missouri and graduated in 2020, and then went right into the job market despite it being kind of a crazy time, and worked in marketing in Kansas City for about a year and a half before deciding that I wanted to apply to a HCI program. So I kind of fell into this while I was studying under a specific professor at the University of Missouri, who was an innovation professor. That's what he taught. It was a class on innovation. And he led a trip to the San Francisco Bay Area our senior year, and a couple students got to go every year. So I got exposed to a lot of UX designers in the field, and I got to do a workshop at the Stanford D School, which was incredible. And I kind of just fell in love with the creative energy that surrounds HCI and all the ideation that is involved. I also just wanted to call out that I am the admissions ambassador this year. So if you guys have questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. My information is on the website. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat. So if you want to connect and chat about what it's like to be a student, or if you want me to connect you to someone else in the program, I can absolutely do that. And we've got a class that starts at 6 p.m. So I will be hopping off here, but I wanted to give you guys that information. So just letting you know.
Yeah, there's no rest for Madison. She's headed off to class after this in a few minutes. Well, probably right away, because you need to get there. Thank you much, Madison. And then the last but not least person to introduce here is the person who was our admissions ambassador student worker from last year, who is now back as an alum, Joan.
Hello, I'm
Hey,
Joan. So yes, before I came to the program, I guess it was a long way here. It was a lot of graphic design. Then of course, as a graphic designer, you get into web, email marketing, all of that stuff. So I started doing coding, and I thought I was going to pivot into front-end development. And in front-end development, there's this thing called UX UI that you need to learn. And the more I got into that, the more I knew that I did not want to be a front-end developer anymore. So I did a certificate at UW-PCE, and that convinced me that I really wanted to dig a lot deeper and sign up for MHCI plus D. So I applied, here I am, and I decided to come to this program specifically because of the cohort, interdisciplinary model. I thought that was very interesting. I also really enjoyed the alumni network and all of the guest speakers that we have. Extremely good networking opportunities. Usually most of our guest speakers are in Seattle. So if you follow up with the guest speakers and you follow up with the alumni, most of our alumni are in Seattle too. So if Seattle is somewhere you want to work, fantastic, fantastic opportunity. Every single alumni I've ever contacted, they get back to me within like 5 days. So it's amazing. It's like you're in a family or a club or something. Very, very nice. So I would say that's the number one. And right now, as I'm looking for jobs, I'm contacting them and they're all giving me referrals. So it's like wherever we have an alumni, you've got a referral. But I also talk with them a lot during fall and winter and spring quarter. So they know me. And I did the legwork to do that. So now as I'm contacting them again, they're like, oh, it's Joan. Okay, now we can give her a referral. But I think that's what I'm really, really appreciating right now. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And go alum. Yay. So what I'm interested in hearing, and this doesn't have to be in order or anything, but Dominic and Stefan, you're almost a month into your experience in this program. Joan, you're a little over a month out of your experience. So you've made it through the whole process. I wonder if you could talk a little about the day-to-day and like how you are finding or did find sort of the way that the courses come together in a student's experience. What's it like being in the program like this, knowing that everybody is different in the way they experience it?
Yeah, so I guess I can start. Matt, am I correct in assuming or knowing that classes are now a bit shorter than they were in the past? Like they used to be 6 hours and now they're 3. Is that correct?
No, the number of hours per week that you're in class is still the same. We've done more splitting up so that you
Okay.
might go twice for 2 shorter periods than 1 really long period.
Mhm.
But there's still the same number of course hours in class.
Got it. Okay. So what's been really interesting about this year is the hybrid learning situation in that a lot of our classes provide either an option not to come if you're feeling unwell or split things up by having asynchronous lectures in addition to group time that is in person. And I've personally found that to be a pretty helpful thing just in terms of like maintaining my own social battery. And just kind of having like a range of options in terms of like my own health. And I know that like there are certain instances, or I guess like transitioning out of like being virtual for so long, it's helpful to have that option to kind of like mix and match things essentially. But yeah, I'd say my day-to-day involves, I think how I best like to structure it is basically like giving myself a 9 to 5 of my own that I kind of like apply to myself basically of like you take like 9 to 5 out every day to do grad school work. And sometimes like there are moments where you have to meet with groups that kind of extend beyond those times. But I think generally giving yourself that much time is enough to healthily kind of navigate what is often described as an intensive program. So yeah, I'd say that's like kind of how I manage things.
Yeah, I think for me, the process of managing all the expectations and requirements are similar, and you try to bracket the day. I've definitely been leveraging like my bullet journal a lot over these past weeks in order to keep track of all of the various deliverables and making sure that you're on top of the required tasks, that alongside of things like Google Calendar. And then we also have another benefit in case something falls through the cracks with Slack, right? So you might get a ping from a classmate that says, hey, just as a heads up, guys, remember that such and such assignment is due tonight, make sure to get it in by the deadline. And this just kind of helps you make sure everything is aligned and you don't have any awkward moments around late deliverables and things of that nature. But I think the program overall has immensely fulfilling, especially the standpoint of filling in those gaps. So one of the benefits of this cohort model, and also answering a question I was asked earlier on in the process about, is it a benefit if I come in with a design background, or is it a benefit? I think in one instance, someone was talking about coming in with like this design skill sets in terms of like data analysis. I think those are great because in the instance that you're softer in another area, you'll have teammates within the groups you have in the core courses to help you fill in those gaps. So you don't have to cover all of the bases at the exact same time, much like the broader community that surrounds the MHCID program, that not necessarily interdependence, but the benefit of having a broad set of backgrounds really pays off both from the program standpoint and
Joan.
Okay, so we're talking about how we handle the intensive program.
Yeah, and you could, I feel like you could set up a webinar just with the current students talking about this, with the perspective of having a year in. How is the day-to-day? Did you keep you busy? Did it become all manageable and easygoing?
Yes, I could talk about this for a very long time. I think we've talked about it for a very long time, many, many times. So for me, this program was like a gas. It will just fill up all of your space if you let it. And we always talked about setting boundaries. Like, you've got to set the boundaries. I thought I did a great job in the beginning of the year. I was doing my exercise in the morning. I was setting aside time to like make sure I slept. I always had a bedtime. I told my group mates, I'm not working past 8 ever. Like, and then I'd have a set time to do my meal planning, so I wouldn't have to worry about my meals, so that the rest of the time I could just work. And then that was a slippery slope, because as you go through the program, you realize like, oh, I want to get this thing in my capstone. Like, I wasn't able to experience this, or, oh, this is the opportunity to like get this other experience. I haven't done any co-design workshops yet. I really want to do a co-design workshop. But then as you pile those extra things in, that's when it starts to expand and get out of control. So I lost my working out. I was starting to eat like random food from anywhere. My boundary for sleep just went downhill. And yeah, it was you have to control yourself. Maybe it's like more planning up front, but I haven't totally figured it out yet. I don't know if anybody has. But yeah, because when you come into the program, you're not sure exactly what you want to explore. And as you get to the end, you know more about what you really care about, what you really want to get experiences with. So then at the end, it's like, oh, you're like struggling to like fit everything in. And then that's that last capstone semester in the summer. And capstone semester in the summer is only 9 weeks. It's not the regular 11. So
It goes fast.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stefan, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to add on to that piece around how intense it can get. So I definitely feel that pain. I don't think one thing you want to do is come in with the expectation that it's going to be a cakewalk. No, it's like a full degree. It's a full degree that you are pursuing. It's a graduate degree. It's going to involve a certain amount of commitment outside of class to ensure that you are providing deliverables that are going to be up to snuff, and also that you're going to be able to have the skill sets to confidently engage with a recruiter when that time comes around too. You don't want to yourself short while you're going through this, because then that'll also have adverse effects when you're on the opposite end of the process in terms of now transitioning from being a student to being a professional. So you definitely have to come with the framing that it's going to be work, but it's going to be a process.
Yeah, I think what I'd love to hear from each of you is you're in a neat position here for the people who are attending this workshop. You've made it through the whole admissions process, right? Somehow you put together an application that got you in here. When you think back, do you have any tips for someone who's thinking of applying on what they should or they shouldn't focus on, or what might be on, like, what advice would you give to a prospective applicant, knowing that you made it through the gates?
Okay. I can start by saying, so I tried to form my portfolio around being interested in UX, but not quite having gotten into that space yet, but trying to demonstrate that I had been doing some learning on my own to try to figure that out. And I was fortunate enough to also have like a small, like 1 or 3 credit 1 month course that was design based within my school, which was like almost like a random offering. So I got pretty lucky there, honestly. But there were a few projects that I was basically like kind of creating with my own prompts as a way to kind of show that I had some interest and ability to critically think about some of these decisions that might come up in later kind of instances within the cohort or within the program, I'd say. Alternatively, I would advise that you lean into what you have done already in the disciplines that you are focusing on now, because that you are also kind of able to show your ability to kind of critically work through complex prompts and work with groups, and especially in industry, if you have that benefit as well. As long as you're kind of open about your time constraints, who you're working with, and what you provided to these group projects. These can be great tools for demonstrating that you kind of have the chops for this cohort environment. I guess I can provide some examples as well. So I included within my application the game that I had made with my friend. That was like, we were able to kind of like mold the UXD process, the HCI process around the creation of the game. And basically I was able to retroactively go back and see like in which places was I being a designer, which is, it's kind of a great way to look at your work retroactively. I also supplied a research paper that I did my senior fall as well, and just talked about like obviously this is like, it's not project based. It's basically just showing that I have like capabilities as a researcher, and that is also something that is an important thing to provide as a member of the cohort. Like as Axel mentioned, it's like art background, like technology background, or research background. Like that's like the triad basically. So maybe see where you fit in within those 3 spaces. And I would even argue that you don't necessarily have to come just definitively from one. I kind of find myself to be like a little bit of like design, art, a little bit of research. So kind of like decide what you want to, I guess like show yourself off as, and like really like dive into those specific avenues.
That's awesome. Stefan, any thoughts or tips on how you made it through the whole application process?
Yeah, I'll keep it relatively brief. I want to also give John Tim to jump in as well. I think the tool that I used was, again, like I was very much on an approach where I was trying to get a feel for what was happening in the program. So I think all the way back in August, even, I had the opportunity to connect with the previous class that was cycling out as the new one was cycling in. So getting a feel for what that student experience was, what they thought the meaningful value add was of the program, understanding the ways to kind of tell my story. I was having conversations with Matt pretty early on, understand what were going to be the right ways to frame that journey, and also understand, hey, I come from this business background. Is that okay, right? Or should I try to, shoehorn my outlook into a process that doesn't necessarily fit this space, but maybe now that I can speak to because I've done some additional research. And Matt's advice at that moment was like, hey, no, we have different backgrounds. We pride ourselves on the fact that we have different backgrounds. So, continue to speak to your truth and maybe, just place additional emphasis on the aspects that value in a design context, right? So those pieces of insight was enough to frame my journey. I dived into the experiences that I had in industry and then created, meaningful examples that were going to put myself in the best light for this application process. And then once I got past that step, it was then a matter of thinking through, okay, how do I prepare for the program from the standpoint of just understanding the tools, right? Because the program is so condensed, you're not going to have the time to be able to really have a 3-month course on how to use the Adobe Suite, or 3-month course on how to use Figma or Prototype, or maybe Qualtrics if you're coming in from a research background and that's where you want to go at the end of the program. So I would really take the time to invest in those spaces there, because that's what I did at the after that process for the program, and I think it's really beginning to pay off now, especially with those readings. Do not sleep on they are incredibly
Awesome. Joan, you want to chime in with any advice, and knowing that this is hard because you've given so much advice over the last year, going through this as the student ambassador, but tips for someone applying, what do you think is the most important things they should take away as you thought about your own experience and last year?
Yes. Okay. So basically it's know who you are, know the program, know what the program can get for you, and know how you can diversify the incoming cohort. So, and then also where you want to go after the program. So that's basically everything you need. Who you are, what the program does, what it can do for you, where you want to go, and what you bring to the program with the cohort. And if you can get all those things in there and we can get a very genuine picture of you, then we can do that cohort building. Because I think once you understand that each cohort is like very precisely picked out, right? We have a certain number of visual people, certain number of animation people, certain number of HCI people, and then we have these other backgrounds that also come in and give like this other diversity. And we're not just looking for like your background, we're also looking for like the culture that you can bring into the cohort as well. So it's not only like that background that you bring, it's like your culture and that sort of, that sort of thing. So once you think about all of that and think about you at an individual level, and you can genuinely show that and show what's important to you, and we can see like a genuine view of who you are, then we can accurately figure out like, okay, these people would be really good together. This is a really good mix of everyone. And that's what we're going to do. I would say, don't feel bad if you don't get in, because maybe like the 1 year that you apply, tons and tons of people from your background applied. And it's a little bit random, right? Because each person looking may not specifically look at yours, and maybe the pile is just too big, right? For your specific background, but you don't know. Maybe in your year, maybe only 2 computer science people apply, right? And you could be one of the 2. Or maybe there was only 2 business people and Stefan was, or there was 100 and he was like 1 out of 100. Like you don't know. So just apply and see what happens. It's like the magic of the cohort building. And I would definitely say have a lot of eggs in your basket. Or don't put all your eggs in one, have lots of baskets. Wait. Okay.
You got metaphors going left, right, and sideways. I agree though, and sort of Joan, that was a great summary. Dominic and Stefan both spoke to this, but knowing yourself and knowing the program, like those are your tasks, is putting together your application, showing how, like having a clear argument for why you're the right person for the cohort and why this cohort makes sense as your next step. understanding what we can do in MHCI+D to get you to the next stage. That really is a good, like, those are the kind of the key posts as we go along. I want to be conscious of time. I feel like I want to keep talking to you all. And here, I intended to ask you what projects you're working on in ideation and hear from Joan about capstone, but I think we've gone longer than I expected. So you'll be around for Q&A, I hope, and students, guests can ask questions as we get into there. And I'm sure you've been doing a lot in chat already. So I'm going to move on really briefly to a couple more things, and then we'll go to question and answer time. Thank you all so much for all that you've talked about today. That's been really helpful. So, yay. Let's go a little further. Axel, do you want to talk about we've seen 4 examples of who's right for MHCI+D, but overall, what are we looking for here?
We're looking for curious individuals, right? That bring in a lot of different views, backgrounds, but I think we want you to be curious, right? And we want you to be willing to take this journey, and willingness to learn. I mean, this is not, the thing is always like, you get a program like this, and it comes with a hefty tuition, and you have this feeling that, okay, I gotta chip in, and I gotta pay this money, and then I expect a certain type of service for that, where I come out with a degree. And as you already saw, like, this is no hand-holding, right? This is not a 4 seasons of getting a graduate degree in HCI and design, but this is part of a really renowned university, right, with thousands of you ahead of you, that we have like a lineup of Nobel Prize winners here. So actually being part of the ship comes with a set of expectations, and it's an honor to be part of this university, right? So when you look at our program in comparison to others, and you look at the job opportunities, right? Matt mentions that 95% employment, like landing that job is not a problem, right? You're in one of the 2 most vibrant areas in the United States for this, right? So that is usually not a problem, and I think all our alumni can attest to that. But you're part of a very high-level research community here. So I think you need to be willing to do the work that comes with it, and meet the challenge that comes with it. And I think what really defines us is our willingness to work hard and our curiosity and openness to do this, right? So if you're the kind of person who thinks, well, they got to do something for me, this is just part of these, you sign up, you get a degree, then you're not a fit for us, right? And we're not a fit for you, and you will not have a great time, right? So this is about finding yourself, identifying yourself, doing the extra mile, doing more than we expect you to do, but also managing your time so that you have a positive experience doing this, right? This is a lot about learning to manage a household. So if you have all those traits, and if you're serious about this, and if you're curious, right, then you will become a great member of our cohort, of our community, right? And I think that type of mindset will also be part of the reason why you might decide for our program, right? Because it's a serious and engaged work environment with an openness to discuss everything. So I think that defines us, and I think those are the qualities we expect from you.
Yeah. Keep that kind of a perspective in mind as you're looking at different programs. This is, as Joan was saying, putting your eggs in multiple baskets and working that metaphor through. There's a lot of applicants for all of these programs right now. So part of what you need to do is probably maximize your odds by applying to multiple programs, but you want to understand the programs well enough before you're applying to say, like, am I actually right for that place? Is that where I could thrive? Because part of what you want to understand is, is this the right structure for you? It's the structure we love. We're fully invested in the way we've described things here. We think it works really well, but it doesn't work really well for everyone. So understand enough to say, like, hey, that's the place that's the right place for me. I'm not going to talk too much about the applications because we do put quite a bit of information on our website. So I'll just touch really briefly here before we go to Q&A. When it comes to deadlines and dates, the 15th are the days that you need to have in mind going forward. Application deadline, January 15th. We don't do rolling applications. There's no advantage to applying early. Just make sure your application's in by the 15th of January. And then 2 months later, we send out notifications to everyone, whether you've been admitted, not admitted, or put on the wait list. If you're offered admission, you have 1 month until April 15th to decide whether or not this is the right program for you. So the 15th, those are your deadlines to have in mind along the way. Application materials, again, lots of information on the website. So just to touch on these, and then we can use Q&A if you have specific questions along the way. Pretty straightforward in the most part. You're going to submit your transcripts. You're going to submit a resume, 3 letters of recommendation, and then the 2 pieces where you really put together your argument for why this is the right program for you are the personal statement that everybody will do, and supplementary materials that are not required, but most people do submit. Those 2 pieces are where you can really kind of show what you're bringing into the program and why this is the right next step for you. And there's more materials on the website about those. We could talk about them in Q&A as well. International applicants, you know to look also for demonstrating your English language proficiency through a number of methods. Again, we break those down, what different methods you can use for that on the website. You need to have graduated from a 4-year undergraduate degree in an accredited school. The University of Washington takes that very seriously for grad school admissions. So if you went to a 3-year undergraduate degree, there are some additional supplementary steps you can take through additional study, but you won't be able to apply directly with just a 3-year undergraduate degree. And then you need to convert your GPA, and there's more about that on the website as well. So we are at 20 minutes after 6, or an hour and 20 minutes into what was allegedly an hour and 30-minute session. I think now we're going to go to Q&A. We have been taking questions in chat. I haven't had chat open because of the slideshow, but I'll start looking there. I'd ask Dominic, Stefan, and Joan, if you're seeing any questions in chat that would be good to start with. I would welcome you raising the questions, and we can all talk about them here. And I'll start reading the chat as well.
There was one that immediately stuck out to me. It was from Asamir, I think it was Amir, and they mentioned that they are currently an HCID grad student in another university. Can they transfer some of their credits if they get admission?
Good question. The answer is unfortunately or fortunately no. It's such a tightly structured program and a 1-year program that we want everybody to come in together and go through the whole curriculum together. So there's no transferring of credits from other programs. You'll just be coming in and joining the cohort like everybody else. Thanks, Stefan. Looking through these, I'm just kind of picking and choosing, but anybody can, in our group of co-hosts, can raise other ones. Somebody asked about the supplementary materials, the portfolio, how we prefer to receive that. We want you to send us somewhere on the web. So you don't need to submit a PDF of your portfolio that has a size limit. In the application, you'll point us to somewhere online. Now that can be a portfolio. That's kind of where our field is, but it can also be a Dropbox folder or a Google Drive folder where you have materials within that. It depends on what you're presenting. So any of those work, but in the application itself, you just send us somewhere with a URL that takes us to where we can view that material.
And just to add to that, from the reviewer perspective, it is always great if you have some form of narrative with your work. So, that's the benefit of a portfolio. You just click through the project and, they usually build up in a certain arc. You show your strongest work first, you make a selection, don't show us everything. Don't show us just raw files and expect us to do the time and find out the relevant pieces in your Google folders, okay? We will not do that. We need to look through a lot of applications. And, if you have a mechanism for us to show us your work in a very concise, clear narrative, that would be perfect. I mean, that's what a good portfolio does. So if you send us files or, research papers or posters that you did, make a selection, make it very clear, kind of hierarchical thing, like first this, then that. So that makes it easier for us to actually find the work that best represents you.
That's great. Yeah. Part of being a designer is to have the user who's going to be experiencing your application in mind. And you really want to be thinking about what is this faculty member who's reading hundreds of applications experiencing, and how can you make it pleasant for them? Because that's your task. How can you convey in a concise way what you're offering to this program? Doesn't have to be a UX project. Oftentimes, I think people can go down the wrong pathway when they come from a really interesting background and they present a UX project that they developed, say, in a boot camp or an online course. That's going to show us that you're interested in UX, but it's probably not going to show your strengths. And you'll be judged as a UX designer based on having presented that, where that would be a lost opportunity to instead talk about something that you're stronger in.
And also what we see a lot is mobile app walkthroughs with 20 or 30 screens in a row, right? If you can't tell me in the first slide what this is about and what I should pay attention to, right? I'm not spending the time of looking at it, right? So the idea is like, okay, how can you show like the key moment in your experience? Like, what is the one thing that sets your mobile app apart from others, right? And show me that one thing and talk about it, right? Write a short description of why this is relevant. And then I get a big picture of it. But if I need to find that myself, it's like finding Waldo, right? I'm not going to take this time. And, I think I speak representatively of all the reviewers of finding the specialty in your design. That's your job of pointing that out, right? So think about it when you show work samples to do that.
That's really good. Yeah. I see a number of questions about sort of pieces of the application. I'll answer some of them. Some of these might be very specific, and I would really encourage you to, if we don't answer them, follow up with an email to mhcid@uw.edu. That'll reach me, and I can help you out with those as well in specific cases. A couple of things. Deadlines for letters of recommendation was asked. Letters of recommendations are technically due January 15th, along with everything else. You don't control letters of recommendation as much as you control the rest of your application. We're a little more flexible if letters come in late. If your application comes in late, we're not flexible. If letters of recommendation trickle in a little bit later, we'll give you a break on that. But you could be evaluated at any point from January 15th onward. So you really want to do the work of encouraging your recommendation letter writers to get those in on time, if at all possible. But we kind of understand that you're not in complete control there. Can I delay for a year if I'm offered admission? Almost certainly no. During the COVID era, which I hope that I can refer to that mostly in the past tense, we exercised a lot more flexibility with deferrals. In general, like Joan mentioned, we're crafting a cohort in our admissions process. And so we don't prefer to allow deferrals because we want to craft each year's cohort, understanding everybody coming in. So deferrals are not generally granted, except in emergency circumstances. The thing you can know is if you get offered admission and you're unable to attend, you're probably going to be in a pretty good position to, with a year more of experience, to make a compelling argument again the next year, but you will have to apply again. Somebody asked about, well, there's questions about GPA. Probably worth reading the website and then contacting me with your specific questions on GPA. There's different methods to calculate. There's different methods to convert. I can help you out with that as well as you go along. What interesting questions are other people seeing in chat? I'm not sure that I'm seeing everything that's coming through. So
the question on how many case studies should you have in the portfolio, I thought was a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have not put a limit on that. But again, think about who's going to be receiving this material. When we've had general discussion with faculty about like, should we put a limit on portfolios? I'll tell you the numbers that we've been discussing are 1 project, 2 projects, or maybe 3 projects. We've never had a discussion about more than 3 projects being a possible thing to encourage. You really you might have a portfolio or a supplementary material that has more than that, but you start losing control of what gets looked at. I would focus on quality much more than quantity. If you're presenting something where it happens to have more projects, think a lot about what the top projects are, because people aren't going to be reading down into the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th projects. And so 1, 2, 3, those are good numbers of cases. Axel, you've read a huge number of applications. How often are you reading 4, 5, 6 projects?
Well, you know, it depends. If the student is able to, the applicant is able to communicate those 5 projects, I read them, right? So if they're like a page, I mean, I think a good project can be covered in a page, right? Or like in a poster. It can be covered in a paragraph and it can be covered in a hero shot, right? So if you have a good hero shot and you have a good paragraph with it, I count that as a project. Because sometimes you want to show process, right? It really depends on what you find, what's the most interesting thing and why you're sharing this project. Always keep in mind, don't show us projects that you think we like, show us projects that represent yourself, right? Because you want to find a fit for you and you don't know what we like yet, you know, and we have a pretty interesting taste because it's all of us who are reviewing this from all the different departments. It's the entire faculty group, right? So people come from all kinds of backgrounds. And, you know, sometimes I have students in my pool that don't have a design background. And sometimes, you know, my colleagues in computer science sent me over a design-oriented portfolio. I sent them over, you know, materials that are more sort of development-oriented. So we have a really good pipeline going there. So this is really, we are not just, are we an interdisciplinary program? We're also an interdisciplinary review committee, right? So really think about the work that represents you best and make it concise. But also, if you have interesting process stuff, show it to us. But don't show us everything. The D in design stands for decision making, right? And that's one of the things we're looking for. We want to see that you can make a decision.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a question about what do I do with NDA projects from work? Basically, if you're bound by confidentiality agreements, that's something that I think all of faculty reviewers, we understand that happens, right? And that's pretty common in the field. For something that you're putting online, my advice is you probably want to honor those NDA agreements and know that that's something that people face. Ask yourself if there's a way you can talk about a project without violating confidentiality. Can you talk more generally in a concise summary of what you did? Sometimes people have recreated projects where they don't use the deliverables and materials which were for that client. I think that might work. I don't know that it works all the time. So I think maybe a summary of what you were doing without going into specifics might be more compelling. Axel, any thoughts on those NDA covered projects?
Yeah, I mean, so if you release a project and you basically break your NDA, I mean, we honor that and we will not share your portfolios, but at that point, you're actually releasing the work. So it's really, you breach it at that point, right? When you actually share it with us. You don't need to show off with the clients you work with and showing off in the quotation marks right now. I'm oftentimes in agreements where I can't talk about the client, you know, or the partner I worked with, and I can't describe the project. I can't associate the real name with it, but I can still talk about it in terms of, you know, the general thing it was and what the type of workers we were and so forth. And I can even show things when they're not identifiable with the project or with the client, right? So, you know, think about that space. Like this is all part of crafting a portfolio, right? How can you make sure you're within the legal boundaries that you signed off on and don't, you know, break them? Because we don't want you to get in trouble just because of an application process.
Anybody noticing other questions out there that we should take on? You've all have had a good eye on what's showing up in there. As you have like individual questions about your circumstances, those are great ones to follow up with me by email. Really, I've been emailing or chatting with you a little bit about some of the questions you have, and some of that might get into particulars that we can do by email as well.
Oh, Matt, there's a question. Are grants or scholarships offered?
Really good question. For the most part, we do not have funding for scholarships and grants. I think especially at the application stage, you really should be thinking about this year as a question of like, is it worth my own investment? There are some, we do have some funding avenues. They're minimal enough that, especially at this early stage when you can't get any promises of that, you should be thinking of this as a year-long cost to you. We firmly believe that it pays off in the long run. That doesn't change the fact that you're committing a lot of money up front, right? You're putting a lot of money into this, and that's one of the things that you'll need to take into consideration. Teaching assistantships, graduate assistantships are technically possible, but very unlikely in a program like this. We are in such an intense program. You're also in a master's program where first dibs on assistantships go to PhD students, that it's unrealistic, especially at this stage, to be thinking that you can pay for this program by being a TA or being a graduate assistant, a research assistant to a professor. It just doesn't work out, even though technically possible. So there's a little bit of graduate funding available. We will talk more about that once you're into the admissions, once you're offered admissions and the like. But for almost everybody in the program, student loans are the way they're making it through the program.
Matt, can I add a portion here?
Yes.
Just around the cost of the program itself. So given the fact that this is a public university, it does dampen the total cost of the degree in comparison to other offerings out there as well. So I think that's also another to consider.
And I just want to add about the cost of the program. I mean, the cost of the program covers our expense. Like, this is not a program that generates a revenue, right? We just basically price the program so that we can run it because it's an interdisciplinary program. So, you know, that part of the infrastructure and being in Seattle and being part of the university, I mean, it's our best sort of balance that we can strike. So don't look at this program as like something that generates a huge income for whoever runs this program, right? This program operates based on its expense. So being a public university is reflected in that.
And one more additional point that I want to put on this point, because this was a fairly significant point for me as well when I was thinking through the process. You know, one good piece of advice that I was able to receive from a friend was that you should think about, you know, whether or not the total debt you're going to have can be covered 1.5 times in your new role, right? Like, so are you going to be making 1.5 times your total amount of debt when you start your new job post-program, right? And the program, in terms of like averages, right, in the past has been able to very much clear that threshold of 1.5 times in terms of those first roles out of the graduate degree program. So it is a professional degree. You are going to have to pay that cost, and it's a significant cost, but it's an investment in yourself that's going to allow for meaningful earning potential over an extended time horizon.
Excellent. Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, that's a good way to be thinking about it, I think. So we are past our 1.5 hour planned time. There's still a lot of really good questions in chat. I am going to say that really looking these over, yes, we're recording the session. Demographics of the cohort, you can look on our website and see pictures of every cohort to sort of see what the demographics are like. Very roughly speaking, usually every cohort has been majority female, about 40 to 50% international and 40 to 50 or 50 to 60% domestic students. Those are the biggest breakdowns demographically, but I'd encourage you to poke around under the people tab on our website. What else? So a few things to look at. Follow our social media channels to hear from Stefan, and he'll bring in guests along the way throughout this next period to talk about the student experience. That's a really great thing to look at. Definitely take a look at our website. All the materials under how to learn more and the admissions pages Those are going to be your friends as you go along. We also have our capstone projects posted up on the website, so you can start seeing what does capstone look like, and what's the final product of capstone look like, and start getting a picture of what you might do throughout this year. As I've said a few times, reach out to me, mhcid@uw.edu. I'll work with Madison, who will also be happy to answer questions along the way from the student perspective. Take advantage of what we can offer to help clarify. We want you to present your strongest self as you're going into this. Axel, any last thoughts as we wrap up today?
You know what? We really look forward to review the applications. And I think that's really what it comes all down to. Thank you for your interest in joining us tonight. And, it's really fantastic to see you all and see your questions. And if you have any questions, just please feel free to reach out to us and be happy to clarify any inquiries you have. But no, this is really awesome to see you all here. My famous last words is like, okay, think about this thing. It's a great place to be. And, shoot us the application.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Axel, Dominic, Stefan, and Madison and Joan as well. It's been great chatting with y'all and talking with some of the rest of you in chat as well. Have a great evening, everyone, and we'll talk more down the road.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Matt, for putting this all together, and student team, MHCID present and past for joining. Thank you, and everyone who has really showed up tonight for learning more about the program. We appreciate that.
Awesome. Have a great evening, everyone, or morning or afternoon, depending on where you're coming in from.
Thank you.